Welcome to the Well Worshipped Man podcast, where men come to build unshakable presence, become the rock in their relationships, and build a legacy that lasts beyond their years. Here, we explore the path to mature masculinity through humble power, daily devotion, and unwavering integrity.
Thanks, baby.
Yeah. So before we get started, we wanted to just share a word with you about one of our sponsors, Heart Magic Cacao, which we are drinking right now and is also right there. One of the things as I worked with plant medicine that I found is really important is finding things that are well sourced and well intended. And so when we are working with medicines like cacao, really purchasing from places that do their due diligence in finding their sources and also have good hearts pouring into the medicine itself as it's being sold. This medicine is made by some of my dear friends. You can find it at heartmagiccacao.com and highly recommend. You like it?
Yeah, the slurp cools it down. Just know my mouth is very heat sensitive.
Yeah.
Heat. So things need to be the correct temperature. This is perfect.
What are we talking about today?
We're talking about spirit and our connection to Great Spirit. We use the words Great Spirit, but you can replace that with whatever word works for you. Whether that's God or universe or source, divine intelligence, infinite intelligence. There are 1,000 names to name the unnameable. And so today we're going to talk about our personal journeys to where we've arrived at our own personal relationship with Great Spirit. And several episodes ago, actually, I don't know if this episode is out right now, but we talked about the hierarchy of relationship. And number one is our relationship and our individual relationships with Great Spirit. And that comes before our relationship with ourselves, which comes before our relationship with one another. So this is a really important thing that we're talking about today.
Yeah, and the reason that we wanted to share it is because in my own journey, for sure, I think of it in your own journey, but definitely in the journeys of the people that we've worked with, there is often a resistance to returning to spirituality, especially when there has been either no foundation of spirituality or particularly when there has been maybe a history of being raised in some type of religion that has created some sort of wound. And then there's a straying from spirit and then this desire to return, but maybe not sure how exactly to do so. And in our personal journeys, it's been such an important part. And because of this foundational teaching that we have about spirit first and then self and then partnership, um, it's the foundation. There's some teachings in different spiritual texts of like a house on sand won't stand, but a house on a solid foundation will, and spirit's where it all starts.
Yeah, and you mentioned something that happens in a lot of people with their own spiritual journeys is this pendulum swing. Often religion is introduced when we don't really have the power of choice. We're children, and those religious doctrines are put onto us. And some of the time that is fire and brimstone, that's do this or else you're going to hell. That's anthropomorphic man in the sky. A lot of these teachings that when men and women grow up no longer resonate. So they're like, that's not for me. I must depart from religion and spirituality and turn my back, right? And just go outside of what I've been taught. So swinging from that strict religious doctrine that many of us have been taught to no longer really having a spiritual relationship. And perhaps today there's a illustration of a third way, which is really not us telling anyone what God is or what spirit is, but encouraging that personal journey of discovery. And so I think a great place to start is for us to interview each other about our own personal journeys. So, talk to us, Jessica, about your earliest memories of God, of spiritual beliefs or doctrine.
For sure. So I grew up in a Catholic home. My mom has a really strong Catholic faith and a beautiful relationship with God through it, which I think is a really important part of the story because this is where, some people, when on their path to spirituality, might think that, because a certain religion or because a certain belief system doesn't resonate with me, it can't resonate with anyone. And that's definitely not true. I've seen, how close my mom is to her relationship with God through the Catholic Church. And so we grew up going to church every Sunday. I went to an all girls Catholic school. And so we also had church and different types of services there. We had religion class every day. And what I loved about growing up going to church consistently is I really just loved the ritual. I think a lot of times when people go to ritualistic things and they don't understand them, it can feel like kind of heartless. But for me, I just really felt like the history and the value of the ritual of church. And I really loved having a place. Even now, like I'm always trying to create some sort of anchor in my week of there is something sacred about every week on this day, I show up to the same place and I see the same people. It really does something for our nervous system so that no matter what's going on in life, this will always be happening. And I definitely didn't have the words for that when I was younger, but I did have the sensation of it. And song was a really important part of that. Like my first memories of being in connection with spirit for sure are singing the hymns with my mom at church every Sunday. And I'm sure other people in my family also sang, but I just always remember sitting next to my mom with the book. And when we sang together and when the whole church sang, I could really feel spirit. And song and sound are sacred practices of essentially every religious and spiritual practice because of the unity that's created amongst everyone when it's happening. And I really felt that. So that was always true, and there's sometimes when we would sing where I could feel, like, an overwhelming amount of sensation, just, like, tears coming through, just for feeling whatever that indescribable thing was that I didn't really know, so it felt true. Um, and then as I started to, develop my own thoughts and my own questions, I just had questions, that couldn't really be answered. And actually, when I'm thinking about it now, a lot of my questions were about like women in the church. And I was like, I don't really understand why women can't be priests. I don't really understand why it's so important that Mary was a virgin in order to have conceived Jesus. Like, why would it have been bad if Jesus was conceived as a normal human? And I still don't really know the answer to that, but no one else did. Like, there was just um, this teaching that everyone was, like, behind without any explanation. And same thing with this is so interesting now because in spirituality and in, like, goddess culture now, there's all of this Mary Magdalene lore. But I remember being, like, 6 years old and learning that the church was teaching that Mary Magdalene was a prostitute, and I was like, "Where does it say that?" And I asked multiple people, and they tried to find it in the Bible, and they're like, yeah, in this one text, it says that this person is the person talked about in that text, which was a prostitute. But then when we would go back and look, like there wasn't actually any proof. And then later, the church actually went back on that teaching and said, no, like that was a false teaching. But there was just a lot of questions that I had that um, I think my first rift with the religion that I was raised in general was like having questions that couldn't be answered other than through the statement of like, this is just the teaching.
That's just the way it is.
Yeah, which wasn't very satisfying to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. I'm hearing, a couple things that you said early on are great things about religion that stay with you today. Like one is worship music. Like worship music is undeniable, it's like a great feeling if you can open yourself up to praising in that way with a group of people. And the second thing is just gathering as a group with the intention of worshiping, connecting with each other as well as God, our great spirit. The rift happened when there are these questions that weren't answerable in any way that satisfied you. There's the immaculate conception. So it's really interesting, really early on in your development, you noticed this uh, impure connotation that was cast around sex. Like Jesus couldn't have possibly be born through a man and a woman having sex. That would be impure.
Yeah.
That would be dishonorable. He must have been the only person in the history of time to have been conceived without that happening, because he is the Son of God. And so as these questions that weren't answerable by the Catholic Church continued to present themselves, how did you respond?
Well, I was still going to church every Sunday with my family, and even when other people in my church in my family didn't want to go, like I still, even now as an adult, like because I love having that experience with my mom and also just like love the ritual, I'll still go to church with my mom and listen to, what the priest is saying or what the Bible is saying through my own interpretation. So it's like I still was doing that. I was in an all girls Catholic school, so I still was like learning religion and um I was really involved actually. Like even as a senior, there was an option to become a Eucharistic minister, which is when you are offering the communion to people. And in the Catholic Church, the difference between Catholics and Protestants is communion is a symbol for Protestants, but in the Catholic Church, there's something called the transubstantiation where they're like, no, like this is literally the body of Christ. And people are like, what? And they're like, I don't know. It's just true. And so that's kind of the separation of it. But I became a Eucharist cannibals. But I became a Eucharistic minister because I received communion once and I was like, well, I really feel the power of this. Like I could really feel the frequency of, now that I'm looking back, it was probably, the connection that's made when everyone in the room is feeling something sacred. When everyone in the room is feeling spirit, it's like that's what I could feel when people were receiving communion. And so I became a Eucharistic minister. And then when sort of around that same time, I was in the depths of some struggles with my body for a while, but senior year and then into college, I was like really struggling with like disordered eating stuff and also my connection slash disconnection from my sexuality. I didn't have a very healthy relationship with my sexuality. I didn't lose my virginity in a very kind way. And so there was just like this identity crisis happening. It's like, okay, this place that actually did feel kind of safe for me on Sundays to have rest and connection, I'm now feeling like I don't belong because my body is dirty and I have sinned and I'm going to hell and I'm also ruined. And, there was parts of my family, not my immediate family, but there's some extended family I had that did go to like a Southern Baptist, like Byron Brigstone Church. So I experienced that, but it wasn't really like it's not like someone was telling me directly all the time, like, if you have sex, you're going to hell. But I think that's something that's important to understand about, the way that religious wounds can happen is that it's really the collected energy behind it. It's like I was receiving the subliminal messaging and the collective feeling that women are less and the body is sinful. And naturally, if you have a body, you're sinful and you're going to hell. And definitely sex outside of conceiving children is not good. And so there were like, at some point we might share more of our stories on this podcast, but from the cliff sense of that, it's like there was a lot going through my mind and body of just like, I'm not welcome here. And I was starting also, I mean, I was in therapy already, so I was also starting to heal some of this stuff. And when I was feeling really low, try to go to church and sing because I knew that that was someplace that felt good. But then I would go and I would try and I would feel this huge disconnection from spirit because of everything I was holding. And so there wasn't really a safe space there. And I really disconnected from spirit and prayer and any type of connection with spirituality or religion for a while, like most of college for sure.
Yeah. I'm going to rewind to you becoming a Eucharistic minister. So you didn't touch on the ritual of the Eucharist and your deep soul resonance with ritual and with ceremony, and that becoming that Eucharistic minister the first time you really led ceremony and really tuned into the intentionality and the symbology of ceremony. That's really beautiful. That's like the third thing that you kept with you throughout religion. And so, what was this season like for you when you totally disconnected from spirit, God, the church?
A mess. It was a mess. But yeah. I wouldn't say that it's not like my life was well put together before I disconnected, but I did have those weekly anchors, you know? And part of why I stopped connecting with spirit was because I felt like such a mess and I didn't really have a safe space. And it was just like I was really trying to heal my eating disorder. I was really trying to like do well in school. I had great, quote unquote, great community, but we were all really just connected through partying. And it felt like I'm sure there were other people struggling with stuff, but it really felt like what I was dealing with was the absolute darkest and like no one could possibly understand, like I was having experiences where I like couldn't leave the house because I couldn't dress myself.
Yeah.
And so I was either struggling in bed or I was like blacking out and disconnecting and getting validation from whatever substances, sex, people, whatever.
Yeah. I just want to take a second and say this heart magic is delicious. Might be the best cup of cacao that I've had.
This is first time drinking it.
It's
So that's
good.
genuine.
Yeah, it's so good.
Buy some.
Probably half the love that you put into it and half the product.
Our love and their love.
That's right. So there's this mess period of like, I'm not even doing the God thing. What was the moment or what was the accumulation of moments that led you back into curiosity about a spiritual relationship?
I was in grad school. I was living in New York City. I was also struggling. Like, I think everyone in my class just thought I was studying a lot, but actually I was like frozen and depressed in my room most of the time. And after the first year, I moved in with my aunt in Brooklyn. And I don't actually know. Like, I think I just was like, I'm gonna look for a church. Um, I think maybe the different energy in Brooklyn versus New York City created enough space, and also I wasn't living right around everyone in my school anymore, so there was just like a little bit more space. There was a park where I lived, so I think that being with family, being a little bit more around nature, just like connected me enough, which I think is actually a really important piece of this. Like some people will return to spirit in a dark night, like everything's falling apart. But also you can return to spirit like through breath and through nature and like finally when the clouds start to lift a little tiny bit. So I was still a mess, but I looked up a church and I found this church in Brooklyn called Trinity Grace. And there was an amazing preacher there who just like the first time I went, I don't know what he spoke about the first time, but I remember being like, whoa, I'm supposed to learn something when I come to church. Like, that wasn't my experience growing up. I'm sure people were learning stuff from the priest when he was talking when I was growing up.
No, you're just supposed to be bored and have enough faith to stay.
Yeah, exactly. That was kind of my experience. And then, like, I was living for the songs. But when I went to this church, I really felt something. And the woman who sat behind me was so sweet. And her connection with me just made me go back. And the second week I went back, they had different, I don't even know if this church still exists anymore, but they had different locations throughout the city. And the second week was their like all city gathering. And I went, and the preacher spoke on this passage, Isaiah 6, 1-8, which is the passage on the ring that I gifted to you. And the passage is essentially Isaiah's calling, and it says, I am a man and I live among sinners. Like, how could God ever be choosing me? And the end of the passage is basically like, well, God picked you, so that's the end. Like, and it was just very matter of fact. And suddenly, like, all of this shame that I was carrying for decades was complete. Like, it wasn't through the traditional teachings of Christianity. It wasn't through like being saved. I don't even really, I love Jesus, but I don't identify as being Christian. But at the time, I was just like, whoa, like, I am like good on life because God said it, like it really clicked. And I think some of that was divine timing, and some of it was the preacher, and some of it was just my path. But that was like the real opening where I started returning, and then I went to that church for a little bit, and then again it started not resonating with me. Just some of the teachings that are in traditional Christianity just were hitting me in a way that didn't feel like actually love. So I stopped going. And then a few years later, I went on a retreat, and it was a medicine retreat, and they prayed over the food. And I was like, whoa, I haven't prayed in like a decade. Even when I was going to church, I wasn't really praying. Like, I was just praying with people while I was there. Um, and so the last time I have really prayed was probably like at dinner with my family in high school. And that really shifted something for me. I was like, oh, I can talk to God no matter what. So much of religious teaching is like you need a mediator. You need someone to communicate between you and God. And that understanding really shifted me. It's like I don't need to be in a container of a church. I don't need to be in a religion. I don't need to be learning someone else's teachings. If I want to, I certainly can. But at the end of the day, like, it's all between me and God. And that was the same message in that passage too. It's like, doesn't matter if other people have identified you in a certain way or if you've identified you in a certain way. What matters is what God says. So that was like the real opening. And then since then, it's just been like, exploration and opening and swaying away and coming back and deepening. And now I'm pretty anchored into the truth that, there's a reason all of these different lineages have spiritual practices. Like, they aren't just, I mean, I guess some people will say it's an attempt to try to explain something, but it feels true enough to all of these different lineages that it's kept and it's nourished and it's passed from one generation to the next. And there's a reason that I was like crying when we were singing, or crying at the Eucharist, or I cry sometimes when we're singing medicine songs. It's like I can really feel in my bones that there is a truth to, like, I'm a part of something.
hmm Yeah, it makes me think how often people will say that most rumors contain some truth, and these spiritual teachings are far more widespread, told again and again through different stories throughout thousands of years. So if rumors contain some true stuff, then those etched in stone teachings, to me and to you, it seems pretty cut and dry that that is true.
Yeah. So that's kind of my story.
Yeah. And there's more, there's more about like where you're at today, which maybe we'll have time for.
Where did your story start?
My story started before me, really. Both my parents were raised Catholic.
Mm.
And so when my parents had me, we were in South Carolina. And they thought it was important that both my sister and I experience church. So they started bringing us to a church that was a Southern Baptist church disguised as a non-denominational Christian church.
Okay.
And, I can't pick out certain teachings from the sermons, but I remember my ritual as a young boy when I was getting in bed to go to sleep is I would lay down and I would pray. And all I remember about that prayer, I think there was some gratitude in there, but mainly it was asking God to forgive me for my sins. Because what I had taken from church is that if I was to die in my sleep without having my slate of sin wiped clean, that I would go to hell. And so I was really diligent every night about naming each of my sins for the day. I can't even imagine like what I had done throughout the day. I was a really well-behaved child, but there was like, I would go through with like a fine-tooth comb through my day of like the smallest things that might send me to hell and make sure that that was wiped. So that's the type of like doctrine that they were teaching. Like, you will go to hell, he said.
Do you remember, like, if you were to think about what you felt like praying that prayer, do you remember what it felt like in your little body?
Yeah, it was fear. I felt subjugated. I felt victimized by God. Yeah.
Really?
And eventually over time, at a fairly young age, I recognized the absurdity of that, and I stopped praying at night. Um, and my experiences of being at church, like people would be in the front row singing, like catching the Holy Ghost, like hands in the air, like touching God. And that experience, like that's a religious experience. Lisa Miller has this book called The Awakened Brain, and she talks about what spirituality actually does to the brain. And she talks about religious experiences, and worship music is a huge one. Even like sporting events where it's like you have a massive group of people who are rooting for the same team, and then other, more natural things like watching the sun come up and these moments of beauty and awe, all are religious experiences, and they do something to the brain. And I remember, didn't know the science at this point, but I remember watching these people catching the Holy Ghost and being like, wow, like they're having themselves time, like that's like a peak experience. And baptism was a thing. What my parents did that was really cool is they didn't baptize me like as a youth. They wanted me to be old enough to be able to decide when I wanted to be baptized, if I wanted to be baptized. I don't know exactly how old I was, but I was like old enough to be conscious. I was maybe like 10 or 12, and I decided that I wanted to get baptized in the ocean. But that was like the same energy of like, I need to be like, my sins need to be washed away. And there were frequent invites at church to come up the stage and be saved. And, you and I have had this conversation about retreats or events that activate the nervous system, and then like asking people to make a decision at the end of that to join a program or whatever it is. And I'm seeing that that's really what was happening when they're inviting people to be saved, because there was this one of the pastors at my church, shout out Sean Keels, was like a bodybuilder, just strong man, like jacked. And every few months, maybe twice a year, he would bring his troop of strong men on fire for Jesus, and they would do an event called Team Impact. And me and my dad were banned because it's like cool. Like they blew up hot water bottles with their lungs, and they like burst, which is really dangerous because if you don't do that to completion, the air rushes back into your lungs and blows your lungs up. At least that's what they told us, but it seems real. And they like smashed blocks, like stacks of cinder blocks with their foreheads, and all these feats of strength in the name of Jesus. She's like, wow, like Jesus gives them so much strength. It's like, no, they've just like been in the gym for 20 years. I'm sure there was spirit moving through them when they were doing those feats. Yeah. And then like at the end of the show, they're like, come up, see what Jesus did. Like, come up to the stage and get saved. And people are just like flocking to the stage. And I'm staying with my dad, and everyone's standing. We're standing up. Seeing people flock to the stage. And my dad would like never in a million years go for that. But I'm standing there as a kid, and I'm like, maybe I should go. Like, this seems like a big moment for me. Yeah. And I didn't end up going up there. But yeah, there was just like this urgency of absolving your sins and giving your life to Jesus. And those are some of my early memories.
It's so interesting to hear you share because the underlying current is fear. And that's similar to my story of like, oh, my body is like I'm gonna die because I have a body, but it's the only thing giving me life. Like, I'm confused. And what we learn, and even like in dog training, it's like they respond better to good, like good job, and to treats, not to like you're bad.
Right.
And meanwhile, there's all of this training basically in a lot of religious contexts of fear. And in in nervous system and in human function and in the way that we connect, it's like we can't really be in connection if we're in fear. And so I find that it's such an interesting route to take. And I understand why, because it's just how it's been taught for a long time. And also like the teachings of the Old Testament are very severe. But it's to teach people to fear something. It's like, if I'm afraid of you, I cannot possibly really love you, because there's some webs being woven about why I'm in connection to you. So how did you start to break out of some of the fear into, other types of curiosity and connection?
Yeah, I'll answer that in just a second. But I think it's really interesting that what that church, the result that they were wanting wasn't really love. It was commitment, giving your life to Christ.
Interesting.
And when you learn about sales, and I had a selling career for 7 years, it's like pain point marketing. They make them feel the pain. And like, what's more painful than burning in hell for eternity? It's like a pretty good selling point.
Yeah.
But what started to like turn and alleviate some of the fear, like I said earlier, like some of it I could just see through. Like, it seemed absurd. Like you said, there were some unanswered questions, like some things. I don't remember particular things, but sermons where they would just say things, and that's just the way it is. That's paralleling to like blind faith. Like, just believe in him, just believe in God. And that was really hard for me too in the beginning, to like believe the unseen, just faith. But when I was about 13, 14, my parents asked me and my sister if we wanted to keep going to church. And we both said no until we stopped going, and we'd go on Christmas and Easter, but that was about it. And it wasn't like a big conversation. It wasn't like, okay, if you don't go to church, then you have to read the Bible. There was none of that. I think there were some certain values that my parents wanted to instill in us, that, the 10 Commandments, most of those are great. And they had done that. And so, I wasn't playing sports through the church at that point anymore. I moved on to like school sports, middle school and high school. And the next point for me is when I was 17 or 18, my family went on a cruise, and I brought The Power of Now with me. I don't know where I found that book. We were in Barnes & Noble, and I think it was just on the table looking at me, and I picked it up and I bought it. And The Power of Now has become kind of this like corny spiritual joke, like, oh, you can't sit at my table unless you've read The Power of Now. But that book, for me, at that time, carried the exact frequency that I needed to put me back in touch with the spiritual reality. And like every word, every sentence of that book was speaking to me what was already written deep in my soul that I hadn't found words for, that I hadn't been able to tap into. And that book just like shook me up, and I was like, oh, there is a reality beyond what I can see, beyond what my senses can collect.
Yeah, they're in between my Brooklyn church and my retreat experience is when I read that book, and it's like it's a joke kind of in the spiritual community because it's like everyone reads it and they're like changes. Like it's always impactful for people, and I had a similar experience where it's like, oh, I've heard words like this before. I mean, I read it much later in life than you, probably was like 24 or something, but the ultimately it's like it just hits somewhere. Like, he really had a gift in channeling that book in the way that the words that everyone else is saying about, like, being in the present, it's like, really land.
Yeah. 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 It's really wild how he was able to do that, like be present. Like that wasn't anything new, but yeah, that, I'm always suspicious of channel texts, but that one feels like it came from somewhere higher.
The most prominent thing that I remember from that text is he's creating this analogy of people waiting in line, and he's like, "If you're waiting, you've already missed it." Like, if you're waiting for anything, you're not in the present. Like, you should never be waiting in line. You should be having the experience of being in the line.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the end of the line, you're now having the experience of being there.
Yeah.
So you read The Power of Now.
Yeah. Read The Power of Now. I went to college, took LSD, and we laughed, but that was big for me. And LSD showed me the thing about drugs is that they allow you to have a experience that isn't as limited by the five senses.
Yeah.
You almost have this extra sensory perception. Some of the brakes on our human experience are taken off. And so you're able to have a direct experience of something that you haven't had before. And so for me, what LSD did was a couple things. The one thing is that I experienced directly the illusion of separation. You've read any spiritual books, you've read that separation is an illusion, right? That we are all part of the same unified field, that the edges that I see right now between you and I are actually false, and we're all like part of this cosmic goo together. But like, I'm not experiencing that right now. Like, you're over there and I'm over here. But on my first or second experience with LSD, it was like, no, like, I'm that chair over there. Like, that chair is me, and all is one. Really felt that. And it really moved me, really touched me. And then the second thing that LSD showed me is that we are all on our own journeys to make sense of this experience that we're having. I have a tattoo on my shin that was inspired by that experience of, I saw like myself on a ladder, except there was like no other rung above me. And I was like, oh wait, I have to like collect experiences and information and actually construct that next run. And then I can ascend another run higher. And then I get to construct another one. And only I can like collect the materials required for me to build that rung. And then at the top of the tattoo, at the top of the ladder, there's this keyhole. And within the keyhole is the universe, which is my truth. It's like my subjective truth, the way that I choose to understand the universe and the way that how I understand the universe evolves. So there was really this, we talk about a personal relationship to spirit. That's the other thing that our friend Acid showed me.
It's so interesting because at least in the realms that we walk through in the community that we're a part of. It's like plant medicine really is a huge part. And you can certainly meet great spirit in sober practices. But one of the beauties of plant medicine and things like LSD is they allow you to get there faster. And it isn't always about getting somewhere faster, but humans, to your point, have this like, we're limited by our senses, and not only our senses, but our protective mechanisms. And besides allowing us to access these extrasensory things, the medicines also really help us remove protective strategies that we don't necessarily need. And my protective strategy is what keeps me separate from you. When neither of us are in protection mode, like the love is running so freely. And as soon as someone gets in protection mode, usually me, uh, there's like there's like a contraction and a pause.
And that's why I dose you with LSD.
But just kidding.
Weird. That are so
First, but by processes, I mean like before plant medicine stuff, my processes were much different, and maybe plant medicine chats are for a whole different pod. But in the way that they dissolve our protection strategies and like give us access to this unity, it changes the way that we move through life. And it is a very common narrative that once someone, you know, touches spirituality experientially, whether it is in like a deep dive breath work or a sober retreat or a plant medicine journey, then it changes. And I think that's a lot of the difference in the blocks that some people have to starting this spiritual path is like, well, I've only ever heard what I'm supposed to feel about God. I've only ever heard what I'm supposed to do to be a good follower of whatever religion I'm raised in. But until I have the experience of really feeling spirit, then it's hard to create that relationship. And it's so interesting hearing your story about, like these sales tactics in megachurches, and I'm sure other religions do them too, but Christian megachurches are like really known for them. Because that's not what spirit feels like to me, actually. Like spirit doesn't feel like this big, intense, like rush of energy, but that is how they're selling it. Spirit to me feels very quiet and very soft and very like pause, you know?
yeah. Yeah. I think it's important that you share that because many spiritual seekers are after that peak transcendent experience, total dissolution of the self, mystical, like geometric patterns. Like, that's why I'm meditating every day, because I'm going to meditate until I see God. And that can be really dangerous to chase after those mystical experiences because they're fleeting. And for most of us, they come far and in between. And it can create this cycle of, oh, I haven't had a mystical experience in some time. I must be disconnected from God. I was just leading a men's group earlier today. And this man said, he's talking about his spiritual experience. He's like, the most mystical thing that I've done is I took a coat that I liked. I saw a homeless man shivering, and I gave him my coat.
Mm, mm, yeah.
Like, I don't need to do 10 ayahuasca journeys. Like, that was it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of our other friends, I think the podcast with Alexander is airing after this.
Yeah.
But he talks about like doing the dishes as a devotional practice. Like it's not a chore, it's a prayer. And uh, that feels really important. It's like, yes, these mystical experiences are powerful and they do unblock maybe whatever the resistance is that we're having to connecting and give us exposure to what it does feel like to be connected. But that's not really it. What it is, okay, that's the big experience. Now, how do I feel that like from within? How do I feel that even in my day to day, even when things are hard, even when things are gentle and boring and soft?
Yeah, I think what we're tapping into is the strength of a spiritual practice. Spiritual practice works. There are people that teach meditation of, oh, you can meditate and like maybe like nothing might happen. It's like, no, if you're doing a spiritual practice and you're devoting yourself to it, you should experience more connection, more love, and more freedom in your life. And what you're referencing as a indicator of a strong spiritual practice is finding spirit in the mundane, is finding spirit in the boring, of like not needing to chase these peak experiences. So what else to you is an indicator of a strong spiritual practice?
Mm. Well, I think that, just like they'll say in yoga classes, like yoga is a practice and it's because it's different every day, and so it's the same for spiritual practice. Like a strong spiritual practice is consistent. And that doesn't mean it's consistent in what it feels like. It's consistent in your devotion to it. And so my consistency or my spiritual practice when it's strong starts and ends with spirit every day. It is much harder for me to end with spirit because the day gets taken away. But no matter what, for years, every morning I start with spirit. And it goes through phases. Like sometimes I am praying, sometimes I'm doing breath work, sometimes I'm just sitting in stillness, sometimes I'm doing all of that. Sometimes I'm really feeling connection to spirit in those practices. And sometimes I'm like, well, I did my best, but it's not about it, to your point, feeling like this strong thing every day. It's about like knowing I'm connecting to spirit. And this is just how spirit wants to connect with me today.
Yeah.
And if this is how I'm feeling it, then that's spirit too. And then in the movement of the day, it's like the spiritual masters are like, I'm connected to spirit in every second. No matter who I'm interacting with, no matter what I'm doing, I am like wholeheartedly aware that spirit is all around me and that everything is love. And that's the goal. It's like I'm not super great at being tapped into that 100% of the time, probably not even 20% of the time. But that is an intention that I have for life, is to like, the intention is how often can I have my witness online and be in the truth that everything is spirit. Every sound is spirit. Every color is spirit. Every person is spirit.
Um, Diving underneath that another layer deeper, what a strong spiritual practice bears fruit. It's not like, okay, my life is the same as it was 10 years ago before I started my spiritual practice.
Yeah.
Okay. So what fruit does your spiritual practice bear in your life?
I have had some health stuff. So I think the most obvious measurement for my spiritual practices is the way that I engage with my body differently, and then also the way that I engage with relationships differently. And same thing, there's phases of life where things are going better or things are not, like those fruits aren't as palpable. But something to remember is like the fruits aren't always being grown on an apple tree either. Like sometimes I'm really noticing them. The apple tree is always there, but like sometimes I'm really noticing the freaks. So I can see how my relationship with my body or my relationship with you is like so much healthier than past part. I mean, I can really always see that. But like, we get lost in moments of like, oh wait, I'm not doing a good job. And it can be harder to see the fruits there. But when we zoom out, it's like my life is drastically more stable, more full of love. I am more clear in my intuition and in my decision making. I'm more clear in my confidence and who I am and like the whys of the world. And I also have significantly less worry. So, like, the physical measurements can wax and wane, but like the sensations in my life compared to even a year ago, but definitely compared to 2 decades ago, are like wildly, wildly different.
Yeah. I'll quote this book one more time, The Awakened Brain by Lisa Miller. She makes it really simple, like having a spiritual life You experience being loved, supported, and guided, no matter what, regardless of any other humans in your life. You experience that as reality. And for me, personally, what I notice from having a spiritual practice is that I'm a better student of life. Like I can look around, do the things that happen and the people that come to me, and I can see teachers everywhere. I can find medicine everywhere. Like, okay, life is like always teaching me. It's like this compassionate teacher that's guiding me along. And that also speaks to faith, right? Trusting that it will all work out, trusting that there is a plan for me and the plan is good. And even in moments of doubt or despair, to understand, maybe not in that moment, but as a foundational principle that it's happening for me. And that makes it easier for me to take risk, to take the first step when I can't see the full staircase, right? To like take the leaps in life. I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't have a connection with spirit.
Yeah, while you're talking, I'm just thinking of like, so we have this 40-day chakra sadhana practice that you can join starting January 1st. It's awesome. We're doing it right now. We're going to do it again with whoever joins. And as if I just finished going through the creation of the throat chakra, and the throat chakra is all about truth. And so truth is really loud in my mind right now. And while you're talking, I'm just thinking of like this essence of trust and of the fact that spirit and the universe are benevolent and working in my favor. And when I'm worried, a huge thing that the spiritual practice has done for me is same thing that you're saying is like when I'm worried or when I'm in a low point in life, when I'm in a phase of contracture, which we will experience forever, there will always be contractures before expansion. When I tune into truth and to spirit, 10 out of 10 times I hear it's going to be okay. You're where you're supposed to be. I never hear you're fucked. You know, it's like, it's always, the truth is always, you're where you're supposed to be. It never is any other message, but you don't know that if you don't have a daily spiritual practice. If you only show up to spirit when things are good, then when things are bad, you think that you were just hearing that things are going to be okay because things were good. But when you show up consistently every day to your connection to spirit, then you know that that truth never wavers.
Mm-hmm. It's always the most simple things when spirit speaks. It's like, keep going. You're right where you're supposed to be. You're on track. Unless you're not. Then spirit speaks through different ways. It's like hard recalibrations in your life. You lose a job or there's a breakup or something falls out of resonance and you have to vocalize it.
But that's the beauty of the devotional, like consistent practice. It's like if you really, when you're not showing up and you're not listening to these messages and you're not in prayer and you're not in meditation, it's way more likely that you're going to have these harsh recalibrations because you're not listening. But when you are listening daily, you hear these messages sooner and the recalibration isn't as severe.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely a fruit is like the recalibrations or the return to center doesn't have to be as harsh when you are finding the message early because you're showing up daily.
Yeah. One more question for both of us.
Okay. I just have one more thing I want to say before your closing question. So something else that was really important part of my journey that I alluded to in the beginning was this connection from spirituality, because I felt that it was like dishonoring who I was as a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And this podcast is the well-worshipped man, but there are women who listen to, and also there's the feminine within all men. And I think that my experience with feeling like being connected to a religious construct or to spirit, it wasn't like I was actively thinking this, but definitely somewhere in my mind was happening like the feminine is bad, the body is bad. It's like this ascetic practice of like the human experience is bad, no sex, no emotions, like be stoic. And that isn't where I found myself in spirituality. It might be where some people find themselves in the stoicism, but I have found myself in alignment with the spiritual path where it's like, this earth was created for my enjoyment and for my learning experience. And so it is part of my path to feel the hard things and be in connection with spirit, but also to enjoy like the beauty and the rainbows and the pleasure and the butterflies and all of these good things about my body without demonizing them. And so in my personal process with like returning to spirituality, I really decentralized this picture of Father, Son, Holy Spirit in my mind of like a man in the sky controlling things where, you know, Father, Son, Holy Spirit could easily be mother, daughter, Holy Spirit, or parent, child, Holy Spirit. And in the way that I work with spirit now, which isn't to say that this is fact, but is just where I am in my spiritual journey, is that if I am saying the word God, I'm referring to the masculine pole of one half. And if I say the word goddess, I'm referring to the feminine pole of one half. And when those two join, then above that, I have great spirit, which is like the one unifying thing of all. And it doesn't bother me when people say God as the one, because I know that that's their relationship to it. But I do think that there is some unwinding that can be helpful for people's return to oneness if we start speaking with words that actually indicate oneness instead of division.
Yeah, language is important. Names are really important. And that was your split from the Catholic Church, as it felt like goddess was othered and excluded.
Yeah.
You said something else about the ascetic path, and paths are many, truth is one. And for a smaller percentage of the population, the ascetic path, the renunciant path of monks and nuns is for them, right? And it's really interesting because from my perspective, I honor what they do, I respect what they do. It's like they're taking the easy way. It's like how much pain and suffering can you experience in the temple? Boredom, sure. But you're not like entering into romantic relationships. You're not taking big bets and risks on yourself. And so for me, it's more of a spiritual adventure to like be out in the world, taking the hits, getting roughed up a little bit. Um, and of course, if you go and listen to a monk talk or like Thich Nhat, um, or even Eckhart Tolle, like he's almost a renunciate. Like they have like some of the deepest spiritual wisdom, and I'm super grateful for them. But that's just from where I sit.
Perfect.
Um,
Yes.
how does spirit speak to you?
Mm. Spirit speaks to me mostly softly and in the dark. Like the more I can quiet my sensory experiences, the easier it is for me to hear. Spirit speaks to me through sensations in my body. Spirit speaks to me through song and through our relationship. And spirit speaks to me kindly. Um, and there's a lot of different, to your point, like there's many paths, but there's one truth. It's like there's a lot of different ways that I can access spirit. If I am sitting outside, I can feel connected to spirit through a hummingbird that flies by, or through a flower that I'm noticing was bloomed today but not bloomed yesterday. I can also feel spirit in my pain, which is a really important part of learning to feel spirit there, because a lot of times people feel absence of spirit there. But if I am with spirit daily, then I know that there's no, it would be crazy to feel, I mean, for it to be true that spirit have been with us in our pain, because it's like, I'm most likely to get care from you when I'm in pain. I get care from you all the time, but I'm most likely to get care from you.
LSD.
Um, and So, or I'm most likely to get a certain type of care from you, I guess is the better way to say it. It's like people want to help people in pain. So why would spirit be any different? Um, and at some points in my life, spirit has spoken to me really loudly and tumultuously because I didn't have the skills to listen. And I think that that's been a huge learning experience for me because what is true is, if we don't hear a message, it gets louder. If you don't hear what I'm saying and you say, "What?" I usually speak louder, maybe more clearly, but definitely louder with some irritation, you know? And then, like, it's kind of the same for spirit where, um, there will be a lot of questions for many people who haven't developed a connection with spirit of, "Why is this happening?" "How could spirit do this? How could there be all of these bad things?" And it's like, well, we're not listening. We're not loving each other, and we're not loving the earth. So, I don't really believe that there's a man in the sky waving a wand, but I believe that the universe is created to act in a way that when we are acting out of alignment with love and integrity, there is a natural karmic response of severity. And if we listen, then the war and the natural disasters and the heartache lessens. But if we don't listen, it grows.
Yeah. There's that question for a lot of folks. If God is real, spirit is real, then why is all this pain and suffering happening? I don't know. It sucks. And that divine intelligence is operating on a completely different dimension, frequency. I don't even have words to describe how that intelligence is operating, but it is far beyond what our feeble human intelligences can fathom. And the divine design spans thousands of lifetimes. Like, none of us will see how all this shit plays out, right? And so it's very intricately being orchestrated. And we can't know.
Yeah, when I think one of the awarenesses that I had about the Bible is like the Old Testament is more of the masculine energy of Great Spirit, and the New Testament more of the feminine energy of the Great Spirit, and we need both. And there isn't punishment that's occurring because of our action, but there is a natural order to things. So there are gears turning all the time. And if we miss a gear, there's a natural recalibration that must occur to put things back into place. And I think that helps mitigate some of the fear of like, I'm going to be punished if this thing happens. No, you're exactly where you need to be. Maybe your learning of this lesson is actually exactly how it's supposed to play out. And also, if you do it again later when you're not supposed to be learning this lesson because you already learned it, then you might put something out of place. Um, how does spirit speak to you?
Mm. Spirit has spoken to me in words once. Well, so when we say like we talk to spirit, it's not like really having conversation. And a couple other times I've gotten clear messages. One was the birth of the well-worshipped man, birth of his brand. But more often than that, spirit speaks to me through the moments that I am touched and the moments that I am moved. Spirit speaks to me through serendipity, through nature, through our connection, through animals, and through yoga, through food, through indulgences. And I think something important to know here is that I probably don't get it right every time. There's probably times when I trust the voice of spirit, and it's actually the voice of my conditioning or my fear or my trauma patterns, right? And so developing a being where you can attune to the authentic voice of creation also requires developing a relationship with those other voices of our fears, our doubts, our programming, so that we can distinguish between them. Because you and I joke about this, it's funny, but it's also not that funny. Leaders of cults, male leaders of cults who are direct channels to God, who everything starts okay, and then they're like, I have to impregnate every woman on this ranch. God told me. Like, I don't know about that, bro. That seems to be like a voice of the ego and a voice of like too much power too quickly.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. That is great, great insight to just it's not just about it is about getting familiar with that sensation of spirit, and to the point of what I was talking about with the loss of the feminine, it's like the feminine is this deep understanding of your shadow, your wounds, your fears, your guilt, your shame, so that when you feel the sensations of your humanness, you know that that's your humanness telling you to recalibrate for sure, but it's not necessarily that God's damning you or that God's guiding you to do bad things or to feel bad about yourself. And with that, yeah, put me open there.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I want to talk about our offer again.
Oh, okay, great.
I want to talk about our 40-day chakra of sadhana is the first offer that we're making to the podcast audience. It's the first really affordable and available offer that we're creating to the public. And it's a 40-day chakra sadhana. It's really fitting for this conversation. A sadhana is a spiritual practice, and a sadhana can include a variety of different things. And if you don't have a sadhana, this 40-day practice will introduce you to uh, some breathing techniques, some somatic movement, some reflective and contemplative practices that you can use beyond just the 40 days. But the way it looks is every day for the first 40 days of January. So it starts January 1. We will email you a guided practice. You need to do nothing but show up every day for 40 days. The practices are about 30 minutes. Spend 5 days on each chakra, and then there'll be 5 additional days at the end. And Jessica's been leading this. I've been participating, and the amount of energetic and emotional cleansing that I'm experiencing, and we're only up to the throat chakra at this point, has been wild. Like, I feel like my frequency is very consistent. I feel like the opportunities that I'm attracting are really resonant, and I feel a deep faith in the steps that I'm taking in my life. So we're going to do it again starting January 1st. And we'd love to have you guys join us. It is minimum donation $40. So it's $1 a day. So we've made it really accessible, and we'd love to have you all join us.
It's so good to hear your perspective on it. And the last thing I'll add about that is I'm really wanting to encourage everyone, just like we're doing it together, to do it with loved ones. So one of the stories that gets told when people start this work is, I'm the only one doing it. Or, I've changed my relationship with my emotions and my reactions, but my family hasn't, or my partner hasn't, or whatever that may be. And we can't make everyone in our field do this type of work, but this was created to be a really easy access point. So we want it to be annually repeatable. It's kind of designed to be a deep clean of your system every year. And so, regardless of how much experience in this work you have, or how little experience in this work you have, it's for you, which means that you can do it as a fun thing with your friends. You can do it as a fun thing with your family, with your partner. There's not really any prerequisites to it. And when we all do something so powerful as a 40-day practice together that we're all getting something out of, it's like we all rise together. And that is a really important piece of the work that we do as well. It's like we all rise together.
Yeah. And you'll get a chance to interact with us. There'll be a WhatsApp community where we can support each other in there. And this is our first time ever doing this, so it won't ever be this affordable again. So we hope that you join us this year. We'll put all the info in the show notes, and we'll see you there. Thanks for listening. Shout out Hard Magic.
Homework.
Homework. You're not getting up that easy.
My thought on some integration work. I think we should call it integration work instead of homework. People have homework trauma. I've been meaning to say this for like 10 episodes. However many we have. So integration.
Hey, what do you deal with that? Deal with your trauma.
Integration is start noticing when you feel connected to something bigger. If you don't have a connection with spirit yet, or if you already have a super connection with spirit, it's like start noticing that sensation more and pausing more so that you can really feel the beauty of creation running through the life around you. Anything else?
No, just a joke that I'm not going to make. I'll make it after the show is over.
Okay, just for me.
Because you know me better than the audience.
I love you.
I love you.
See you guys next time.